What's up, guys? David DeSalle here, your host of the Business with the Boyz podcast, and as always, joined with my co-host Landon Troyer. What's going on, dude?
Not a whole heck of a lot. Just going to be chasing some basketball games here. Daughter's got a tournament, and so yeah, just doing that this weekend.
Nice, banging out some work in advance, going to support Brad. Everything's on the up and up.
Amen, amen. So, how about you? Everything good down there?
Yeah, everything's good. Still going along with the house search, so nothing has changed there just yet. But hopefully that goes well. But for today's guest, I remember. So Jeff Himmelberg, he's a founding member and senior partner at Advanced Radiology, and he's also a founder and owner in Pura Vida Vein Center. And I remember back when, how should I say, the Business with the Boyz podcast was just a twinkle in our eyes over the summer. We were still coming up with the name. We were designing the logo, and we were sitting around the fire out on your back patio. And one of your neighbors, Jeff, came over, who his personality just kind of, no pun intended, but I just made the connection, radiated, amongst the group. And as soon as he left, I remember hitting you on the knee, and I was like, dude, we got to get him on the pod if we end up launching this. He's just a cool dude. He's very successful, and I had a lot of fun on this episode.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Jeff just brings a totally dynamic background to every conversation, honestly. Comes from central Nebraska, small town. Honestly, one of the most intelligent individuals that I know, obviously from a medicine standpoint, but he just looks at the world through a great lens as well. He's an awesome human. I think one of the cool things about Jeff's story, right, is we don't have a lot of conversations with individuals in the medical world that are also entrepreneurs, right? I mean, there's just not that many of them out there. I have a lot of conversations with physicians, obviously, on the personal client side of things, but not a lot of them that are in the types of settings that he is as an entrepreneur. So, the fact that his first business exposure or education came from literally after many, many years of medical school, residency, fellowship, was picking up a Business for Dummies book at Barnes and Noble, right? Like, how crazy is that? And just trying to have to bootstrap this thing and figure it out, and the amount of risks that comes with that, right? I mean, you've got a ton of capital invested into your education to get up to that point, and then to turn around and go out and take yet another leap of faith when you could have a pretty cush little paycheck going over here to say, you know what, I'm going to put it all on the line and go bet on myself. So I thought this was a great episode and kind of a different perspective than what we've done before. But that was, kind of my takeaway on it.
Yeah, and you're not exaggerating either. It was literally picking up a book called Business for Dummies. And he also walks through, his story from like building out this bougie office and, carrying this high rent and, just wanting, and just wanting to, do it because he, the first venture that he had went really well, and he felt like, anything I touch, turns to gold, and realized that, hey, you still gotta be strategic and intentional with what you're doing and not over leverage yourself. And then the other cool thing too, that we were able to unpack, and I heard the story around the fire when we were at your place. He saved someone's life that legitimately died. And
the EMTs had actually coded her and called her, deceased at that point. It was a crazy night. I remember it vividly.
Yeah. So you're definitely going to want to tune into this story. But before we pivot over to the interview with Jeff, just want to say a big thank you as we have been the last few episodes. Our listenership is continuing to grow. The support is continuing to pour in. So any feedback that you have, any guests that you have, as always, feel free to send them over. But with that said, let's get into the episode with Jeff. Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces. That me, you really playing with your life. I'm about to come and run it all back. So Jeff, welcome to the show. I remember when I first met you. I know you and Landon have known each other for quite some time, but when I first met you, we were at Landon's house, sitting around the fire, and literally as soon as you left, I tapped Landon on the leg, and I was like, "We got to get this guy on the podcast." So appreciate you being open and joining.
I thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's fantastic.
Well, maybe just for some context for the folks listening, give us sort of a broad overview. And of course, we're going to dig deep throughout this episode, but give us a broad overview as to your background. What do you do? How'd you get started? And then we'll interject along the way with some additional thoughts.
So I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, Hastings, Nebraska, about 22,000 people. And, we weren't well-to-do by any means. We weren't dirt floor poor, but we didn't have any expendable income to say when I was a child. So I remember I played a lot of sports, and I remember on my baseball team, the kids who seemed to have a lot of stuff, their dads were doctors. And in a small town, obviously, a lot of the doctors did very well. And so when I was very young, I was like, that's what I'm going to do when I grow up. I like taking care of people. I seem to do okay in the classroom. So that's just what I was always going to do. And so as I went through high school, stayed top of my class, got full ride scholarships to college and so forth, and then went through and did the classically trained Western medicine route. Got out of college, went to the 4 years med school, and then did 6 years of training afterwards to become an interventional radiologist, which we'll talk about later, what that entails. But initially, I finished my training at Northwestern in Chicago and ended up moving back to Nebraska and working at the University of Nebraska Medical Center as my first job. I was 32 years old, I think, before I actually had a real paycheck. But it was one of those deals where it's like, you grow up in an academic setting, and that's just what you do is you go back to the academic center and you do cases, you teach kids and trainees. And it's kind of just initially, I thought I'd made it at that point in time. And then as time went on and I worked, as an employee of a big medical center, you realize you have no power. You can't make any decisions on your own. You have no authority to make any business decisions in a situation like that. And so as time was going on, I would listen to these patients talk to me, and they would be like, I hate coming to Omaha. They're from these small towns around the area. They'd be like, I hate coming in. I hate trying to find a place to park. I hate trying to find traffic around this monstrosity medical center. You guys are impossible to find. And as I'm listening to these patients, I'm like, you know what? There's no reason we couldn't do what I do, which is procedural based stuff, in some of these community hospitals. As long as I have a cath lab for cardiologists, I use a big fancy imaging suite. That one I can do 95% of the stuff that I want to do in a cath lab. And so I was talking with a buddy of mine who's a few years older than me, and he's actually one of my business partners now. He lives out in Grand Island, Nebraska. But we were knocking around, maybe starting our own little practice, and contracting ourselves out with hospital systems to bring these procedures to smaller towns outside of the Omaha metro area. And so we were kind of going back and forth for a few months, kind of seeing, feeling each other out and how this would look and what it would entail from a business standpoint. And then in August of 2007, the radiology department at Bryan Hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska kind of imploded, and they lost their interventional radiologist. And so their CEO called us and it was like, we know you guys have been talking about forming your own company. How about now? And so literally John and I talked to each other on the phone for a couple hours. We talked with the CEO back and forth, and within 3 hours, we had negotiated our first contract. And so I gave my 90-day notice at the med center saying, I'm going to step out on my own. The chairman thought I was crazy, which maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And we started covering Bryan the next day. And the interventionalists that they had that got let go, there was some contractual issues, and Bryan Hospital in Lincoln is a trauma center. It's a stroke center. So they have to have interventional radiology coverage. So we had them kind of pinned up against a wall, which was good for us. From a negotiation standpoint. But then a little slick move we did is we ended up hiring back the interventionalist that got let go because the non-compete was non-enforceable the way they let him go. So we actually plugged him right back into the same institution the next day. So a little chess move out of the gate. But That's where it started. And that was our first major contract. And now we cover 11 different hospital systems over 6, 7 different cities in Nebraska.
And for those who don't know, what is an interventional radiologist?
So I've got a lot of ways to describe it. I call it surgery through a straw. I'm a human plumber. It's basically using imaging to do microinvasive surgery. So you come in and say you've got a tumor in your liver. Instead of going into an open operating room and opening you up to get a piece of that tumor to see what it is, we'll use ultrasound. We can just do some conscious sedation, and then just through a little poke hole in the skin, actually go in and get biopsies of that. Takes 5 to 10 minutes versus going to a big surgical procedure. We do a lot of angiograms. Cardiologists do angiograms of the heart. We do angiograms everywhere else: brain, kidneys, legs, whatever. Lots of stents, things like that. Trauma, if you come in with a ruptured spleen, a ruptured liver, instead of going and getting a splenectomy, we can go in and do an angiogram, find where the bleeding is, and put little either particles in there to shut down the bleeding, or little metallic coils to shut down blood flow. It's just microinvasive. They're in and out of the room in an hour, hour and a half, and they're up walking in 2 hours. Lots of stuff like that. You come in with a stroke and you have a blood clot in your brain. We'll do an angiogram, through the groin, go up, find that clot in your brain. And then we have a device we can actually just suck it right out of your brain and restore blood flow to the brain. So there's about 200 different procedures that we do, but it's all variation on the theme using imaging to keep it microinvasive.
But all very specialty type stuff though, right? I mean, there's not all that many, interventional radiologists in the state. I know
there's just over 20 in the state of Nebraska, I believe. 5 of us are together in our group. So we have 5 of the interventional radiologists. We've got a pretty good market share. And then we're actually adding one this coming summer and then one the summer after. So we'll be up to 7 interventionalists here in 18 months.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Where'd you get so you're in med school, you got your first, real paycheck at 32 years old. And then how old were you in 2007 when you started the business? 33. So you spent a year working, then you launched your business. Did you spend any time from high school or college or your first year actually working, learning about business at all, or were you just thrown right into
absolutely 0%? If there's one thing I can say about Western medicine and training, I mean, we get great training from a science standpoint. The business education in medicine is terrible. There's 0. I mean, I went through all of college, all of medical school, all of my training with not one accounting class, not one marketing class, not one business class, which is kind of crazy because in the College of Arts and Sciences in undergrad, you got to take art history and history of American jazz. I mean, underwater. A lot of good
those, did you?
Right. I mean, what am I getting out of that class now? Nothing. But to me, I think maybe we could change that going forward for some of these academic institutions and throw, maybe some accounting classes in there, some marketing classes in there, and, help prepare the people that go into science for the real world, which honestly is business.
I tend to disagree, though, Jeff. It works out really well in my business on the private wealth management side of things to have you guys be absolutely terrible when it comes to finances.
That's right. We know nothing about finances. And so therefore,
pretty good job security.
Tons of our money to invest it for us because we are not smart enough to do it on our own, which is 100% true.
That's funny.
No, I think one of the intrigues for David and I to have you on here, Jeff, is really because we don't have a lot of people. I don't think there's a lot of people in general that are so specialized in call it a tactician field, but also translate into now being a business owner, right? Because again, you didn't go to school for any of this shit. It's just like, boom, there's the opportunity.
Right.
Let's go. Well, and figure it out on the fly.
I mean, it was a 3-hour conversation and it was like, oh shit, here we go. Grab the parachute. We're jumping out of the airplane. And I got to be honest, it was a little scary at first. I mean, I'm going from a nice 6-figure income, guaranteed, show up every day, get, 8 weeks of vacation, your retirement's kind of taken care of, to 0 guaranteed income. And so it was a bit of a leap of faith at the beginning. I shared this with David when I talked to him before. I mean, literally the next day I went to Barnes and Noble, that was like pre-Amazon, and bought Business for Dummies. That was literally the very first book I read about business. I know. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but I had to learn something. You know what I mean? I knew I was in over my head from a business standpoint. So, I mean, there's nothing like trial by fire. That's for sure. Right. The best teacher's experience. And
sink or swim, baby.
Right.
It was I kind of believe too that like, so let's say you and your, then and now business partner that you launched this with, let's say you spent a year or two trying to put everything in place, figuring it out, time out the move, make sure it goes off without a hitch. I feel like that gives you too much time to get in your own head. You can also argue
analysis by paralysis,
right? Right? You can also argue that it allows you to
paralysis by analysis, whatever that is. Yeah.
Yep. But I think because you had to make a decision so quickly, you didn't have time to figure out why it wouldn't work. You just had to make it work.
Exactly. We had to make it work. And I mean, I grew up, my dad owned a landscaping company, so he was always his own boss, right? You work when you want to work, you can take time off when you want to take time off. And, I'm forever thankful for that job because number one, it taught me how to work my ass off. And so I'm very thankful to my parents for instilling work ethic. So I'm not afraid to do anything. Second of all, it also taught me that I don't want to do manual labor the rest of my life. So it was good motivation. And then this opportunity comes up and it was, God given. It was like, all right, here's your chance. You can either take it or leave it. And I felt like at that moment in time, like if I was ever going to be my own boss, never is there going to be such a great opportunity as now. And so that's kind of where it started. We started off with that one contract and then I remember what are you
up to now?
11 right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and I remember leaving the med center and the chairman's like, I did a lot of pediatric interventional radiology in my training in Chicago. And so I was covering children's for the med center. And I remember when I left, he's like, well, you can't take that business with you. And I said, that's okay. That's fine. I wasn't leaving to try to steal any business from them or whatever. But I did know that myself, my business partners, one thing we brought to medicine in Nebraska was customer service on two ends. Number one, for the patient, knowing that they're that most important patient of my day. I want every single patient I have every day to think they're the most important person I am taking care of that day. And second of all, for the referring physicians, because we're a referral-based specialty. I get no business unless people send me procedures. And so we, instead of saying, well, no, we can't do that, or, no, instead of saying no all the time, like so many interventionalists would do, we're like, yeah, we'll do it. We'll figure it out. And so we brought customer service to both ends, and that perpetuated the business for us right out of the gate. And I remember, he's saying, I can't take the children's contract. It wasn't 6 months and children's called me.
I know you now have the children's contract, so that seemed to work out well for you.
Yeah, exactly. And it worked out great. But it's one of those things where they then called me and said, well, we miss your service. We miss, the way you took care of these kids. Would you be willing to come back? And I'm like, absolutely. So, you just sign up another one. And then the very first patient I took care of that gave me the idea to start going to small towns was from Fremont, Nebraska. So then I called up the radiologist in Fremont in early 2008 and said, hey, this is my name. This is what I do. I'd like to bring, interventional services to Fremont. And they were super open arms, went out there. Within a month, we had that contract locked down. And then it just kind of slowly, kept morphing from that point forward.
And I could speak personally on the service side of things, because for those of you listening, Jeff happens to also be my neighbor, lives approximately 1 mile away. And my wife knows that should I or when I have an event medically, we're in a little rural area. I said, your first call is not 911. It is Jeffrey Himmelberg. Get his ass over here and we'll call 911 after the fact.
That's right. I'll bring my AED too. I got that in the garage. So
yes, sir.
Well, on that note, because a situation like that actually did happen, and that's what sort of intrigued me a lot when we worked together in person, Jeff. But you actually have a story. I think I even said to you, I was like, so you're like a real life superhero because you save someone's life, off the clock. Tell us that story.
I don't know about a real life superhero. I'll call it just doing my job.
Hey, listen, those are my words. You can accept them or not, but that's how I view you.
Thank you. But so Landon actually calls me, Monday night last winter.
Yep.
And he's like, yes, somebody was saying an ambulance over at Big Sandy, which is the community I live in. And he's like, do you know anything that's going on? And I'm like, no, I'll go jump in my truck and see what's going on. So we go for driving around the lake, and one of our neighbors, there was an ambulance there. And so we go inside, and I know the lady that owns the house. And I was talking with the guys in the ambulance, and one of my other neighbors, who's an ER doc, had just gotten there, and he's doing chest compressions in the ambulance. And I'm like, what's going on? And they found this poor lady's daughter, like cold and unresponsive in the house. And so the squad was actually going to call it as she had passed. So anyway, I talked to my neighbor, we jump in the ambulance. And of course, these ambulance guys are like, whoa, hold on a second. You guys don't work for us. Like, what are you doing here? We're like, no, we're like the neighborhood town doctors. We're just let us do this. And so we started, CPR on her, doing compressions. She was intubated, so we could breathe for her. And she had no rhythm. She had no pulse. So they had an interosseous drill, which I couldn't get an IV on her because she was so tiny and so dehydrated. So we ended up using the drill. They'd never used it before, and stuck an IV basically into the tibia, in the bone in the leg, or the bone in the leg. Got IV access, started pushing fluids. Got a little history from the mom that she had this episode of what we call rhabdomyolysis, which is muscle breakdown, and she'd been in the hospital for it like within the previous week or so. Well, one of the side effects when you have that disease, that muscle breakdown, is you get hyperkalemia. You get high potassium, which leads to arrhythmias in your heart. And so we started pushing fluids, and we started pushing sodium bicarb, and we started pushing all these drugs to, just assuming that's what was going on. And within about 10 minutes, she had a pulse back, and, she didn't respond at all, when we would stimulate her, but she got a pulse back, and her oxygen saturations were up in the 90s again. So, she was viable at least. I didn't know for as long as she was down, and her body temperature when we got to her was 84 degrees. I mean, so she had to be down for a while, but retrospectively speaking, that's probably was neuroprotective for her because her brain was on chill. And so I was afraid. We ended up going into the hospital that night. The squad takes her into Omaha to get a CT scan of the head. And I was expecting to see all this edema and basically worry that she would be brain dead. And her CT scan's normal, just a miracle. And so she gets admitted to the hospital. Lo and behold, she's extubated 2 days later and comes home, goes to rehab, and comes home physical rehab, and comes home a week later.
And now you know why my wife calls Jeff first.
That's right. You tell Taylor I'm ready anytime.
Yes, sir.
It's pretty wild and equally as concerning to hear you say that they were about to call it too.
Well, you got to remember we're
a rural volunteer.
Where it's a volunteer fire department.
I can't say that. I was not optimistic when we started CPR that this was going to turn out the way it did. But at the same time, what do you got to lose? She was in her 20s. Like, that would have been a horrible loss. And so, not that any loss isn't important, but losing a child, I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, and good work.
One of the good stories,
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you had mentioned before, that story around customer service. And I want to tee it up with an experience that I've had, and Landon, I'm willing to bet that you're in the same camp, but I went from seeing my primary care physician in a hospital setting. And, we've all experienced that, where you show up on time or a little bit early. They always take you late. The nurse spends some time with you, goes through a checklist. The doctor, it's super transactional, takes about 12 minutes with you, spins you out, you're good to go, pay your deductible, whatever. When I moved to Florida, I sought out a concierge doctor. And what I noticed is I got there about 10 minutes early. He took me in right away. We spent an hour together, like actually having a thoughtful sort of discovery meeting. When we left, or when I left, I had some questions. He followed up with articles. He followed up with podcasts. If I call him, he either answers me or responds within like 30 minutes. He replies to my emails the same day. And I was like, wow, this experience is wonderful. Why wouldn't everyone do this when you compare it to a hospital setting? And then I started thinking about it some more. And I'm like, all he did was take me in on time, spend some time with me, and communicate like a human being. And I'm like, shit, the bar is set so damn low.
So low.
So my question is, when you think of customer service, customer experience, what are things that you do that aren't groundbreaking, and what are things that you do that are actually above and beyond what someone would expect?
For me, first of all, this is not groundbreaking. It's just what you said. I'm on time. My time is very important to me. I expect that every patient I see, their time is very important to them. Now, granted, if there's an emergency trauma or something and your day gets kind of thrown out of whack, that's one thing I can't control. But I thrive on efficiency, and I get in, I get my procedures done, I get out, and I stay on time. It would never fail. I felt so bad when I was at the med center. We'd go to the VA once a week and take care of these vets, right? These poor guys, if their surgery, didn't matter if their surgery was at 7:30 in the morning or their surgery was at 4 in the afternoon, they all had to be there at 6 in the morning to check in and sit there all day, and it's just the system of the VA. That's just the way it was run at that time. And I felt horrible for them because it's a waste of their time until they need to actually see me. And so just being on time and being punctual so patients aren't sitting around and waiting, simple stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's like you said, you show up, you're 10 minutes early, boom, you're in the back and you're ready to go and have a meaningful conversation. Same thing we do. Things that we do that go above and beyond. I like to have a little bit of charisma and joke with my patients. I mean, they're obviously scared to see me. They're undergoing some sort of procedure if they're seeing me, whether it's a minor one or a major one. There's always trepidation on their part, right? And they're in a hospital. 99% of people have nothing to do with medicine and don't like going to the doctor anyway. So they're already on edge. So what I do is I introduce myself. I'm always Jeff. I'm never Dr. So-and-so. I want it to be personal for them. I want it to be a relationship that they, because I've only got 5 or 10 minutes before going back to surgery to most of the time, unless it's like a big cancer case that I've met them before. I've got to meet them, get their trust that they can believe in me and my skill set, and make them feel at ease and make them feel like they're the most important person I'm seeing that day. And I take that to heart on every single patient I see. I don't care if it's a minor procedure. I don't care if it's a major procedure. I'd
interject and say, knowing you the way I do, they are the most important person at that time.
And they are, and it is. And I want them to know that, I don't
everything with you is
I'm in a hurry to get to the next person.
That's one thing I think is great about you, Jeff, is the human element comes through whether you want it to or not, because you don't know any other way, right? It's the reason you and I connected so quick. There's no bullshit. I am who I am, super successful, but you catch you in your yard mowing in your flip flops. It doesn't matter where you're from, walk of life. Everybody gets treated the same way, and I think that's one of the things I love about you and try and do myself. So,
and I've got a bunch of good one-liners. I pull. They're like dad jokes. I pull out on my.
I love dad jokes. Give me some more ammunition, please.
My favorite one is I do a lot of lung biopsies. Right, these people have been smoking for 50 years or whatever, and they get lung tumors, and so we got to diagnose their cancer. And I'll be like, they got to go into the CT scanner and get prepped and get sedated. So I'll be like, all right, I'm going to go smoke a Marlboro. I'll be right there. You know what I mean? Just like that, just to let them know
guard down.
A human being too, or, the old, let me go Google it and I'll be right in, just stuff like that, just to mess with them a little bit, because it never fails. At first their eyeballs, are about the size of basketballs. And I'm like, are you serious? And then they're like, oh, whoa, he's joking. Okay. But, just to let them know that you're just a person and you're just there to, I want them to be comfortable. I want them to know that I want it to be, I want it to be a 5-star experience, even if you're in the hospital. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
What have you experienced as a result of focusing on customer service and customer experience as to the benefits that you've received as a result of those actions? I
mean, from a business standpoint, people talk about you. And, I get all my referrals I opened a varicose vein center years ago. I don't even advertise. It's all word of mouth. And the best thing I can do is have a patient that leaves me in the hospital or at my vein center, or when I used to own a medical spa, and be like, that guy's good. That guy's cool. He knows what he's doing and he does a great job. And just by that, I get more patient referrals it's grown my business exponentially without me trying. You know what I mean? When I first opened my vein center, You're spending $3,000 a month on a billboard, and you're spending $10,000 a month on television ads, and you're spending, print ads and all this money, and it's just flying out the door. And let's be honest, those businesses that advertise, or the media that you use to advertise, they don't give a shit about your business. They want your revenue, for your advertising. That's it. They don't really care. And so, once we got the word of mouth out there that, this is where you go, this guy knows what he's doing. Customer service is fantastic. We quit advertising all across the board. We don't advertise for my interventional radiology practice. We don't advertise for my vein center, none of it. And, if I don't have a day where I don't have 12 to 20 surgeries, it's a slow day.
I mean, think about that. I'll talk to him. He's like, yeah, I had 24 cases today. I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
So to be punctual is tough, but it makes tough, it happen.
But, a lot of the stuff we do, I'll have 1 or 2 big surgeries a day, and then I'll have a bunch of quick hitters and easy stuff. But, it's you stay efficient, stay on top of it, know what the hell you're doing. Makes it a lot easier to be efficient if you know what the hell's going on too. So.
And we talked about the marketing strategy to the patient, which is do a great job, be a human, be on time, crack some jokes, make it a referable experience. But you have another party that you need to advertise or market to, build relationships with, and that's the referring physicians, if I'm not mistaken. What does that look like to get them to refer them to you as opposed to the other 18, 19 folks that do what you do?
Punctuality, as far as they have a request to get something done, look at the film, see if it's something that we're that we should be doing, and then get that patient in. If I can get them in, if it's a hospital setting and somebody comes in and they've got diverticulitis and an abscess in their belly, okay, put them on IV antibiotics, we'll get to it next week. No, I want them down there that afternoon. I want them down same day. Anything we can handle right away, I would rather take care of right away. I don't care if that means I stay late, whatever. It's punctuality, getting their patient taken care of as soon as possible. And that's
work over Christmas.
Yeah. Or, Christmas Eve at 9 p.m, whatever. And I worked Christmas Eve till 2:30 Christmas Day morning is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's also the lifestyle I've chosen. And I've got this, I think humans, we limit ourselves so much on mindset, right? The I can'ts and I won'ts and, I don't knows versus the I get to mentality. And I learned this the hard way. A few years back, I'm on call all the time. I never saw my kids. And I kind of got into that negative mindset a little bit. And it was just an epiphany that comes to me in the middle of the night as you're taking care of a trauma patient. Like, man, I'm so blessed to get to do what I do. And to make an impact in these people's lives like that. Like, and then it was like a light bulb went off. It's not I have to go to work. It's I get to go to work. I get to take call. I get to go in and take care of this freaking bicycle that's got mowed over by a car. You know what I mean? That's a privilege to get to do that. And a good side effect, number one, you make an impact in their lives. And on the business side, I'm well paid to do it. And you got to look at that. Like, not many people are that blessed to get to do stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be in medicine. I don't care if it's business, finance, whatever, the I get to mentality. I think if people could overcome the negative bullshit in their own head and the bars they put over their own, opportunities, instead of seeing something as a barrier, be like, okay, what is the opportunity in this situation to turn this around and make it something that's prosperous or something good? And my business has grown the last 10 years exponentially after making that mindset change.
That mindset change, and also, which I guess your profession is a little bit more sensitive to being able to fully apply this example, but I'm sure you still do it and it works out well. But saying yes to something, even if you don't know how to do it, and then just figuring it the fuck out. I have a saying.
Well, we do 200 and some procedures. I didn't do every single one of those procedures in training. Right. I fix a ton of broken spines when they come in with compression fractures. I did not do one of those surgeries until I was an attending. You know what I mean? And I think that in medicine, especially, and business, if you're not always learning, you're either growing or regressing. You're doing one or the other. There's no such thing as being stagnant. It doesn't happen. So you're either learning and growing and making yourself a better business person, a better physician, a better mom, a better dad, or you're regressing. and there's no in between. And so for me, it's just, always trying to bring out, there's always new procedures that are coming out. We, in our group, we do everything we can to stay on top of those new procedures and incorporate them into our practice and be the first ones in the state to do it. And that's another source of referrals. Oh yeah, there's that new 10X surgery for tendons that came out years ago. We were the first ones doing it. And guess what? Leads to a whole bunch of patients. I still do it to this day.
Talked about the new procedure from Vegas here a couple of weeks ago that we might start implementing that I found intriguing and rather funny.
Penis enlargement is a thing, Landon.
So he comes back from Vegas. He's on this trip and he stops and he's like, dude, there's a ton of money to be made in dick enhancement. And I'm like, seriously? He's like, yeah, we're looking into it.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. It's a great way. I mean, at my vein center, I've got an outpatient clinic there. I've got a surgery center there. I mean, it's an easy procedure. And so I'm actually getting trained on it after the new year. And it's just, I owned a medical spa for a while, Laniger. And so got approached to be a medical director. And I said, well, I don't want to, I'll be your medical director, but I want to own it too. And so kind of got into that aesthetic business for many years and sold that business 3 years ago. But just any of those cash paying procedures. I mean, the one thing about medicine, if you do classic medicine in a hospital and just bill your cases to, Blue Cross or Medicare, Medicaid, every year reimbursement goes which way? Down. And down. So for me to make the same money now as I did in 2007, which I've been able to maintain, but you're doing 5 to 10% more surgeries per year just to maintain the income you had 13, 14, 15 years ago, which is ridiculous. And so that's why I started, looking at money in the medical world is so looked down upon. It's not, you're just supposed to take care of the people and do this and that. Yeah, I can do all that, but I can also look at whichever procedures pay and focus on those procedures on the outpatient setting, like my varicose vein practice or whatever, and try to make it to where I can actually make a decent living on top of it. I remember going through school and so many people, I'm going to go into pediatrics because I love it, or I love taking care of kids. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. Did you look at the long-term financial consequences of doing something where you make relatively so little money compared to the other medical specialties? You know what I mean? And I was like chastised for even looking at that, but I only looked at specialties that paid.
Have you seen your loan balance?
Well, and that's just it. I mean, my last two partners I've hired in my group, $400,000 in debt when they started.
Yeah.
It's a big hole to dig out of, especially when you're 32 before you start making a damn dime. Your kid, your friends from college that went and got their engineering degree and started working at 22, they got a big ass head start on you. And so you got a little bit of makeup to do.
Yep. Jeez. I got to think that much like anything, I think our medical setting in general would just be a hell of a lot better if true capitalism was applied, right?
Absolutely.
We can't walk into any sort of facility and I don't know what any price is for anything, right? It's
hell, dude, I work there and I don't know what prices are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In the hospital setting, they've got negotiated rates with every single insurance company. They've got their Medicare CMS rate. I don't know what any of these rates are. I know what it is when I do it, what my professional bill is, but those are all negotiated rates too. And so, a patient comes to me and goes, okay, I'm going to get my veins treated, but I can't do it at your outpatient surgery center from my insurance. I have to go to the hospital. What does that cost? And I'm like, I have no idea.
I was talking with
$30,000. I have no clue.
I was talking with my doctor and he's like, health insurance is great for some of the big things, right? That happen, of course.
Cancer,
but
automobile.
He said, and I'm making these numbers up, but the example holds true where he's like, for blood work, don't go through insurance because it'll be, up to your, you got to fulfill your deductible. It'll be like $600. If you pay cash, AKA just credit card directly, my blood work cost me like $80. And there's prescriptions that I needed. And I went to CVS, they ran it up. It was like $120. And I said, oh no, I don't want to use insurance. And they kind of looked at me puzzled and like kind of pissed. And they reran the numbers. I'm not kidding. I remember this number. It was $17 without insurance. Without insurance.
And then so you're paying your deductibles and your copays and you're paying, that's crazy, isn't it?
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. I mean, I guess this is what happens when you involve the federal government in running a corporation, right? Which is medicine nowadays with Medicare and Medicaid services. All payments are based off of that. I mean, it's a pinnacle of inefficiency and waste.
It's wild.
Yeah, I find it weird to believe that I can go to one facility and an MRI costs me, I don't know, $5,000. I go to another and it's 10 grand, right? It's the same
Right.
damn thing. The net
Same
result
thing.
is the same,
Right.
but it's like, there's no way for me to know where that cost is. I mean, it's insane to me.
Yeah, it's so inefficient, and it's so, from a business standpoint, medicine in general is so poorly run. I mean, look at the cost of medicine nowadays. I mean, it's ludicrous.
And I think on you guys' end, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, you would rather it just be straightforward and no
Absolutely.
rates
I wish I knew what I got paid for everything and this and done. I mean,
you could charge a lot more reasonable if you knew you weren't going to just make 35% because they weren't going to reimburse you shit for the procedure you just did, right? You could charge a fair amount, say here it is, and be done.
And I do. There's plenty of patients I take care of, especially in our Hispanic community in South Omaha. I do a ton of vein procedures on those patients. We have a very fair negotiated cash price for the technical fee for the facility and for my surgical fee. Yep. And you know what? They're more than willing to pay it. Yep. Whereas if they go to the hospital, I will tell you with their deductibles, it would cost them way more money just to meet their insurance deductibles versus coming in and paying cash and being done with it. Now, granted, they're not, getting credit towards their insurance to where, after, your $5,000, $10,000 deductible, you're free for the rest of the year, quote unquote. But at the same time, I think it's such a better business model. So I mean, and then there's tons of patients that come through that are like, my insurance sucks, and I'm like, let's do the cash price. And I mean, 9 times out of 10, they'll do it.
So you started working at 32. You started this practice that we've been focused on at 33. You've alluded to having other businesses currently, having had other businesses as well. So my question is 2-part. One, how long into your first business did you get into another business? And what businesses are you currently involved in now?
So when we first formed our medical practice in 2007, this is one of those things, it goes back to my training here. So when I was in fellowship in Chicago at Northwestern, I noticed there was a couple guys that would sneak over and do varicose vein treatments. And so it's all gone microinvasive. It's all endovenous ablation now. It's just you numb them up, you stick a catheter in a vein, you burn it closed, right? Super simple stuff. And I was like, why do you guys sneak over and do this? And it was kind of their little side gig. And they're like, well, reimbursement's pretty good. And so I kind of started looking into it, and I was like, okay. And I actually brought that procedure back to the medical center when I started there. Well, that's fine and dandy. It just doesn't do me any good personally from a financial standpoint to do it at a medical center, right? I get my salary, I get my bonus at the end of the year. That's it. So when I went out on my own, then I was like, okay, now I want to do varicose veins. How am I going to get patients, right? I mean, I don't want to do them in a hospital because I'm just, I get my fee and that's it. It doesn't, and it's kind of, and it's not all aesthetic, but it's one of those procedures where it's super easy to do. It's very low risk and people love it because afterwards they don't have big ropey veins down their legs anymore. And so it's one of those, low risk, high reward type of procedures. And I'm like, okay, what can I do? How about a varicose vein center? And so I opened up, it's Pura Vida Vein Center in Omaha back in, that was probably 4 years after we went out on our own medically, like 2011. And it was one of those deals. We started advertising this and that. And I had a few word of mouth referrals, but then once we started getting busier, then the patients, it's one of those deals. You take care of a teacher at a school, and somebody has to be the guinea pig, right? But that teacher knows 5 other teachers at that school that have varicose veins. And so once you get that one guinea pig in the door and get them taken care of and they're happy, 5 more patients are coming your way. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of how it started growing. And we ended up, I just have it's a nice little clinic. It's nothing fancy. It's just a remodeled old office building. And then the surgery center that my friend owns is below it. And that's where I do my procedures. But it's a destination people can go, it's a nice, relaxing atmosphere. Like I said, we treat everybody like they're a king or queen. They come straight in. There's no sitting around in a waiting room. You come in, you fill out, usually they'll have their paperwork done online. If they don't, We let them fill out their paperwork. As soon as they're done with their paperwork, I see them. And like you said, it's not a 5-minute, hey, how are you, in and out. It's, how are your kids? What'd you do this weekend? Small talk first. Get to know them as a person. Talk about their problem. Talk about what they need to do. I usually ultrasound them right there in clinic. So then I already know what my plan is. I don't have to send them somewhere to figure, okay, get an ultrasound and then we'll figure out what we're doing. It's all very efficient. I scan them right there. Okay, here's what you got going on. This is my plan for you. What do you think? How do you want to approach it? And let them be the boss of their decision-making process. Let them know that they're the ones here. They're my customer. They're my boss. And I want them to feel that way. And sure enough, they end up, yep, okay, let's do it. Let's move forward. But yeah, that was kind of an aside, but 2011. And then a couple of years later, I got asked to be part of a medical spa. There was a couple guys that were putting one together, and then they asked me to be their medical director. And one of the guys in there is a very fun guy, very business savvy guy. He's like, hey, why don't you do this and we'll pay you a salary? I'm like, hey, how about I do that and I own it? You know what I mean? I want stake ownership in this thing. And so that's kind of how we see. They're like, sure. Okay. And so we got that up and running, and we owned that that was probably 2013. And we owned that for 7 years, I believe. And then we sold it off in 2020, right before COVID. Thank goodness. That was
so. And any other businesses, or are those all?
I do some real estate investments in with this company out of Lincoln, Nebraska, where it's basically you invest in high-end retirement centers. Very, very luxurious properties. All of the stuff in-house as far as, women can get their hair done, they can get their nails done and stuff like that. And I started doing that like 10, 15 years ago. And I've done it, it used to be where you actually invested in the properties themselves. And then it morphed into basically every year it's a REIT that you can do, whether it's returning 8%, 10%, whatever. So I've done multiple of those over the years. I think I've got 2 of them I'm left in right now. But those were more of the REIT type ones, and those will cash out in the next, I think, 2 years or so.
And
Is it more passive style?
Yeah, more passive. I just send it all to retirement. I don't even touch it.
And the med spa specifically, did I catch it that's the only business currently that you've since exited?
My veins.
Okay, but the med spa is exited. You haven't exited any other businesses.
We sold that out in December of 2020.
So and Landon, forgive me in advance, but I'm going to hijack this portion because I promised my wife's aunt I would pick your brain about what you had done to create a successful exit with the med spa, because she just opened one a couple months ago.
Oh, did she?
So what are some tips and tactics and things that you did that
it's a super fickle business, because there's a ton of them around, and B, it seems like every dentist, every freaking flower shop person, everybody wants to be in that field, right? Especially if they're female, because then they can get their Botox and their filler and that cost. So for us, we ended up doing, like, for hair removal, we did package plans where, you sell the package. So that was, it's a good upfront cost right away. Plus it's guaranteed return business. And then we were upselling them on their Botox and their fillers and their skin pens and all the other stuff that we did. And obviously, you've got your skincare lines that you have, which are good markups. For exit strategy, it was one of those deals where we were just we had put it out there. Maybe it was available, but we weren't going to fire sale the place, right? We wanted to just see what the market was like. And we just slow played it for like a year until we found the right buyer. And then we found a young PA, she was motivated, she's very smart, wanted to be in business for herself. And so once she kind of came into the picture, we're like, okay, that's the person we want to sell to. And so we kind of slow played, targeted our buyers a little bit, because there were so many people that were coming in and, offering us 50 cents on the dollar just to get us out of it. Well, we didn't need to get out. That wasn't the plan. The plan was to flip it and, come out with a little cash. But so we just kind of slow played it. I mean, there was no secret sauce to it. There was nothing, we had good market share at the time. I've kind of lost track of that business. I know they're still open. They still do a great job. But there's been, another half dozen of them have opened up in the last 3 years. Like, it's a very cutthroat market right now.
Would you say that it was a big referral based business once it got up and running? And also, how did you guys get it off the ground and get feet in the door?
It was off the ground. Our pricing was more competitive than most of the local medical spas. And we kept it that way for the duration that we owned it. We were always best priced when it came to pretty much any service that you had. We had a really good group of girls that were very great at customer service. And then it was, you break into those, circles of female friends, and then they'd all bring their friends. And then that one was just like the vein thing, or you treat one teacher, you get 10. And that's kind of how we did it. I mean, we did advertise and stuff, the old fashioned medias and that kind of thing, but Facebook was a huge thing at the beginning too. Facebook advertising, that drew a ton of people. And obviously that's antiquated at this point in time, but it was a lot of word of mouth referrals more than anything.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for the insight. I'll share it with her.
Yeah, anytime.
So
go ahead, Lynn.
I was just going to say, so how many, I guess, on the business owner side of things, how many people are you overseeing, or what's your team look like today, Jeff?
So our main office for my interventional radiology practice is in Grand Island, Nebraska. Now, there's a little unknown fact to most people that if you base your office, I mean, you would think we would base our business in Lincoln, right? Because that's our main contract. That's a big hospital system. Well, if you base your business in medicine in a town of under 50,000 people, you get a 2% kicker on Medicare and Medicaid services at the end of the year. So we bill from a town of 40,000 people. So, and it doesn't matter where you do your surgery. It doesn't matter anything. That's my office. And so it's an automatic 2% bonus every year. So that was a little curveball we did early on. We purposely structured and put our office out there for that reason. Out at that office, we've got, we probably have 6 full-time employees between our office manager, a nurse, office staff. There's also an imaging center there we used to own, which we had an MRI, a CT, and an ultrasound. We have now sold that business to Mary Lanning Hospital in Hastings. So they own the imaging center now, but we still use office space. And then we also have our own billing company, which is a separate entity. So we bill all of our own cases and submit those bills. But then our billing company also bills for a lot of other doctors in Grand Island, internal medicine docs, family practice docs, multiple different specialties. And so then with that business, I guess I should have mentioned that as a side business, but we make 10% on the billing of those other corporations that we bill for.
That's cool. You're figuring out, well, who else am I paying? Can we just create that instead?
Right. And that's just
save that money for ourselves.
We were paying, 9% for our own billing anyway. Might as well. And with the billing company, I think we have 6 full-time employees right now just for that company. So, and then my vein center employs, 1, 2, 5 other people. So it's not a ton.
20, 25.
About 15, 20 people overall.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah. And we're very fair to our staff. We pay them well. And that's why we never have any turnover. We take care of them. They're a part of our family. We can't do what we do without them, so we want them to know, whether you're answering my telephone or whatever, you're still as important as the rest of us, because we need, the last thing I want is some patient to call up that's got a question about something, and there's somebody on the phone that's mean or rude, or, they're not coming back for business.
Yep.
So when you come from a place that, as we had sort of painted the picture of with my primary care physician example of, the people at the front desks aren't always the friendliest, you're waiting, we just sort of picked them apart. What was it like going from you and your business partner, fast forward to the amount of people that you have now, that recruiting journey in finding the right people who may have had exposure to a bad setup, have gotten in the habits of providing bad service? Mm-hmm. How do you rewire them and get them attracted to working with you guys?
When we go through the interview process, for the last 2, the 2 guys that we've hired on top of the 3 of us that founded this, we had a couple in between there that didn't work out so well. We had a guy for about a year, and it was that same thing, right? Coming from an academic medical background and just kind of an asshole, right? Mm-hmm. To patients, to staff. And that doesn't fit our culture at all. And I thought I had vetted him a little bit better in the interview process. Obviously I didn't. But then as time went on and you get these complaints, and I'm I'm kind of the personal HR person for the physicians in our group. I'm the guy that wants to make sure that every patient has the same experience with any physician in our group as me. And so, we talk to them and you have a discussion, and it's better for a month or whatever. Well, over the course of about a year, that relationship kind of fizzled out, and he moved away, which is good. And then the last two guys that we've hired that are now partners, the way I end up hiring people is I like to work with them when they're in training. And so the last two guys I've hired, it's been working with them while they were trainees. And so they were residents either at Creighton or at the Med Center or whatever. And through my work at Children's or through, some of the other private hospitals we go to, I get exposed to them and they get exposed to me. And usually what happens is they end up shadowing me for a day or two and seeing how I approach every patient and how I approach every procedure. And then I can get a read on them and they can get a read on me from from the get-go. And so then they know as they go through their training and they're coming out, they had contacted us to be hired. And so that's kind of my new model is I take in as many residents and med students as I can now, because I'm feeling them out for employment in 6 years. And so I've got 2 med students right now that are seniors that are going into interventional radiology, and they're great. One's a guy, one's a girl, great personalities. And if they want to be hired in 6 years, I'm going to hire both of them.
That makes sense, because earlier you said, we're bringing someone on this upcoming summer, then we're bringing someone on the following summer. And I'm like, how do you know that? And now it finally clicks.
Exactly. And so the 2 we have coming on are same thing. Just, one of them, his dad's his uncle's an orthopedic surgeon out of my lake. And so I make fun of him. I stole your nephew, you know what I mean? Got him out of surgery, got him in interventional radiology. But it's exposure to these personalities. I mean, I know they're smart people. I know that they're good. It's a matter of, good at reading films and doing surgeries. Mine is it's a personality fit more than anything. And if you don't fit our culture, it's not going to work long term. And we've proven that. It's fizzled out, a couple different times with people that we've employed. But I think we got a solid group of 5 right now. The 2 guys we have coming on, I think are going to slide right in, and I don't think there's going to be any issues whatsoever. And like I said, I'm now strategically planning, 6-7 years down the road when I want to slow down a little bit. Who am I going to take in that I'm not going to retire? I want to manage the practice, right? And I want to be shuffling, all of our physicians to all these different hospitals. And so I want personalities that are going to fit the mantra that we've created over the last 15 years.
So you mentioned, we've throughout the conversation, we've talked about a lot of like positive things and positive outcomes. You just alluded to a scenario where you hired someone, it didn't work out. But I want to kind of pull back the veil and get some insight as to where have you just fallen flat on your face during this journey? Like, where have you tripped up? How have you gotten through that? Give us some of those examples.
First one, when I opened my vein center, I wanted it to be the fanciest, biggest, coolest office in town. And so there's this shopping area in Omaha called Village Point, which is kind of like the higher end stores or whatever. And we decided we're going to open up a 3,000 square foot vein center. And back then I did a little more like medical spa stuff at my vein center too. But so, we dumped $450,000 in a build out. We spent, I don't remember how many thousands a month on rent, $1,500 a month in CAM fees for common area maintenance. And about 6 months into this deal, I'm like, holy shit, we got some big bills. You know what I mean? It was like, I always jump in head first, right? Like, well, let's go. And that one was a little bit of an eye opener because that was a hole we had to dig ourselves out of. And that took a couple of years to get to that point. And then we had a 7-year contract with that lease, and 3 years of that was my personal guarantee. And so I'm like, we got to figure out how to make this shit work, because we can't just be shelling out $15,000 a month. And, writing it out, that's how many surgeries do I have to do to make up that delta to stay on top of it. So we had some serious growing pains at the beginning on how to generate revenue and how to turn a profit. And then after the 3 years, when my personal guarantee was up, I risked being sued because I backed out of that lease because we couldn't afford to stay there anymore. I mean, it was ludicrous. The rent had gone up 40-50% in that 3 years. And it was all built into the contract. And I was just so excited to get the thing up and running. I wasn't reading enough fine print back then.
We're reading enough Business for Dummies.
I should have reread the damn book before I signed that damn contract. But figured that out, got out of that, moved the vein center to what place it is now. And then that was my biggest oh shit moment. Like there was a few months there I was like, I'm an idiot.
Well, it's probably and forgive me for assuming, but I would imagine, like, if it was me, if I started the practice that you had that basically helped get the capital for the build up for the varicose vein center, you essentially worked for a year, you touched something, it started growing. So you probably had a little bit of an ego about you too, where
Absolutely.
It's like, I'm going to have the shiniest thing.
Confident that I could go blow $500,000 and it wasn't going to make a dent. You know what I mean? Way over. And it was a good wake up call, because there's been plenty of opportunities to, invest in ambulatory surgery centers and outpatient centers. And I'm a lot more
cautious with those dollars.
Yeah, there's a lot more patience to me now. There's a lot more reading the fine print. I will be investing in an outpatient surgery center here this next summer, once I work through some details. But I mean, this has been a deal that's been years in the making, and it's been vetted 10 times over. So I'm much more confident in my decision-making process now as compared to 10 years ago when I was shooting from the hip.
I do think it's pretty intriguing. And this is what I was excited about having you on for is how much just business translates no matter what, right? I mean, you could be medical,
life, man.
You could be selling tires. I mean, it's from the marketing and just taking care of people to the employee process to, don't bring on more overhead than you need to. Right. It all translates, and that's why I love business.
Mine was more of a trial by fire than it was anything. But it's amazing. I think one of the most important jobs a person could do is sales, right? I mean, this is so cliche, but Warren Buffett said, invest in yourself, right? Invest in yourself. Know how to talk to people. Know how to make people feel important. Know how to let them know that their story matters to you, and bring that out of people. I mean, I think everybody should be a door-to-door salesman at some point in time, like in college, somewhere in there, have to go sell ice to Eskimos. You know what I mean? And learn how to interact with people. And, my story is trial by fire and figuring it out. But, I think that is priceless freaking training for anybody that's young, who's coming through the ranks, wants to do, I don't care if you want to do business, medicine, finance. I don't give a shit what you want to do to be.
And it translates to every business.
It's everything. I don't care if it's a medical practice. I don't care if it's finance and investments. I don't care what it is. It's everything, and it goes to show you, I think it's a good lesson in relationships are what matter, right? Yep. Building relationships with your client, building relationships with your coworkers, building relationships with your referring docs. Once you have those relationships established, I mean, you've got the game on easy mode, right? Because then they just come to you. They're like, that's the guy you go to for this. Done. You know what I mean? And I think if you want to be a dick and be an asshole surgeon and, let everybody know how smart you are and how wonderful you are, that's great and fine and dandy. You're not going to be busy 10 years down the road. That's not the market anymore. And so I think life lessons in sales and business are just.
And I think the secret sauce in all of that, Jeff, and correct me if you think differently, but it has to be genuine. I know for me now, doing this for 15 years or whatever, I just find myself only working with people that I give a shit about. Like Absolutely. I genuinely give a shit about, because Absolutely. I can't just fake it. I'm not programmed that way. So I think you've got to find a way to work with people you genuinely, I mean, it's David and I. The reason we stayed in touch so damn long is like, I just like the guy from the jump, right? Same thing with you. It's like, you just know.
Personality thing. It's personality fit. Another example along those lines, Landon. So I know every single person that cleans the rooms of my hospitals by name. I know they've got kids. I know what they do. I know what they do outside of work. I know the janitors by name. And you know why? Because if I want to be efficient, there's nothing I can do without that room being clean. Yep. And their job is just as important as my job, because their job, if I don't have them, I can't do my job. And so I kill them with kindness. And that's another thing. Like when I have students shadow me or whatever, I am purposefully over the top nice to the cleaning staff, to, the people in the cafeteria, to let them know that I appreciate you. I'm glad you're here. And I'll even bring up something about their personal lives with the student there, so they understand, like, this shit
isn't just a one-off deal. Yeah.
No, like you said, it's not a fake thing. I genuinely care about them because yes, they're human beings, and it makes my life easier. You know what I mean? If I call them and say, hey, I need a quick turnover, no problem. Boom, they're there in 30 seconds. And now if you're a dick to them, they'll be like, they'll get to you when they get to you. You know what I mean? They'll get to you, but it's not going to be quick. And so it's relationships like that matter so much. And I don't know how it is in the business schools, but I can tell you in the medical schools, it's not trained, that's not taught.
Well, when I was a financial advisor, I started reaching out to doctors, and quickly I was like, honestly, fuck these people. They suck. Because
the attitude, right?
It's right? I'm more important. I'm smarter. I know this stuff. But it's just amazing that I can't fathom how people walk around and live their life that way. And you have no idea how nice it is to hear that the genuine conversation and interaction that we had around the fire at Landon's translates to your professional life as well. And I can 100%. See why people refer business to you, because it's like, I think I'm up to,
that's why.
Yeah. I think I'm up to maybe five or six new clients that I send to my concierge doctor.
Isn't that amazing?
It's living proof.
Self-referral. It's the same.
It works.
Thing. You take care of people, they'll take care of you. I mean, it's simple.
I don't even refer people to them. I sell them before they even reach out to them.
Like you do that. You're doing his marketing for him, right? I mean, that's the most priceless marketing I can get, is if I have a patient that speaks highly of the service I provide. And then not only
that, the cheat code in business. That is absolutely the cheat code.
And not only that, I make it fun for them. You know what I mean?
Random question. Do you have like a big focus on gathering Google reviews for the various practices that you have?
We don't have a big focus on it. We need to have a better focus, especially for my vein center. We've made a little bit this last year of a push with Google. I mean, we've optimized the search engine now, so we're the first name that comes up if you search, veins, Omaha or whatever. That was I'm not super technologically savvy, so to speak. I'm not on any of the social medias or anything like that. I kind of like being a ghost. I don't like my personal business to be out there. So I did not focus on that. That's probably early on when I was talking about overbuilding and overspending when we first built the first center. Another thing is underinvesting in the electronic marketing world and what that can do for you. Because it has made a difference. Because still a lot of people, obviously they're going to Google you before they come see you. Mm-hmm. And it has made a difference when, when we have a questionnaire that they fill out when they come to my office, and it's either word of mouth or Google. That's how they find out about us.
Yeah. I'm looking at, so varicose veins. What was the name of your practice again?
Pura
P.
Pura Vida, Omaha.
So if I'm looking at this, I mean, the good news, you got 5 stars, you got 14 reviews, which is not like it's, 1 or 2 or 3 reviews, but how many patients do you think you've had since you started that?
3,000 to 4,000.
Doug, if you were to even blast out an email or just ask people post-surgery, hey, one of the biggest compliments we can get is a review on Google so other people know that we do a great job and do this. Would you be open if I sent you a link directly to our Google page to share your experience?
Heck yeah.
You get that up to 2, 3, 4, 500 reviews. The other varicose vein centers in your area are not getting
Don't stand
any
a chance. Yep.
Right.
Because it's all social proof, and you got 14 Google reviews, and they're great. But you just said you've worked with thousands of people.
That's just it. Thousands, literally. Okay, you know what? Guess what's getting implemented January 1st? Done.
We can talk offline too if you want help with language and all that type of stuff. But I think that would be a big hit. And then I know you're not big on social, but I don't know if the company has social, but even screenshotting the reviews, posting them on social with a gratitude oriented caption to go along with it can help a lot. So for joining the podcast, you get a free tidbit.
I love it.
Awesome. Anything else that Landon, anything that we didn't cover today that
I'd just like to kind of know, I guess, what's next, Jeff? Like, where do you see this thing going? What's your ultimate exit? Knowing you the way I do, I mean, I know you want to make an impact long term, right? Some legacy type stuff. What does that look like for you? I mean, obviously you're bringing on new docs to join you, but what is long term? What does 10, 20, 30 years look like for you?
In the short term, if I could create any practice I wanted, I would unite all of the interventional radiologists in Nebraska under our umbrella. I would like to have all of them working under our umbrella. I think the customer service, the patient care would be increased multiple folds at some of the hospitals around, especially in the metro area. There's so few of us in the state anyway. And if you're in a private practice group, the interventional radiologists fight with the diagnostic radiologists all the time anyway. Like, to unite all of us under one umbrella would be huge. Now, it's probably a pipe dream, but I'm working on it slowly. Continue to grow our practice, obviously, and take up as many hospital systems as we can. And then as time goes on, like I said, morph into more managing the practice and where all our docs are covering. And, I'll still do procedures forever. I can't imagine retiring. I would go absolutely
you do nuts.
I would go nuts. Do I want to stand in my lab and wear lead for 12 hours a day and do 20 surgeries when I'm 70? Probably not. But if I could go work in the lab for a week at a time or do 2 days a week and then manage practice, on the side, Landon, we've talked about maybe acquiring a vein practice up in Wyoming and Montana, which is I'm very, very interested in looking at that very closely. And when Bo comes to town, I can't wait to meet with him and discuss that with him. And so growing in that more aesthetic medical world a little bit on the vein side, just because I know what I'm doing and I know how to run that practice already. That is somewhere where I look to grow in the next, 5 years for sure. But yeah, I would like to keep this group. I got a son who's 17 right now. He thinks he wants to be a chemical engineer, but hopefully over time I can sway him into my medicine world. But
the dude is freakishly smart, man.
Training, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would love that just to, keep the business going in the family. But, I don't know, that's probably a pipe dream too. But, I would like it to build it up to the point where we united everybody. Whether or not, like I said, that's going to happen is who knows. But like I said, nothing's impossible. And
you mentioned, go ahead.
What's your structure like for your group right now? I mean, is it something where ideally you get the new partners that, or new physicians that are with you to a partner level? Like, is there a clear-cut roadmap for that?
So the way we do it is we're a group. I mean, it's physician owned. 2 years to partner is how we do it. So we bring them on. Obviously, once you start doing surgeries and you start billing cases, you don't get paid for 60 to 90 days minimum, right? So unless we're cutting them a paycheck, they're not getting paid, right? And in our group, we don't revenue share. Every guy is on his own. Every guy keeps what he produces, which is really, really rare. That's another hard part about recruiting into our system is they've got to believe in themselves. And it's my job as leading recruiter to let them know that you can believe in yourself. You're smart. You can do it. We'll walk you through the whole thing. And I mean, every guy that's joined us has done really, really well. It's intimidating at first, especially because this younger generation, everybody wants 12 weeks of vacation,
guaranteed paycheck.
I want a $500,000 starting salary, and I don't want a revenue share, or I want a revenue share. And it's like, no, and no.
But let me ask you something, Jeff. I mean, if that's the way their minds are wired, couldn't you create more enterprise value for you and your partners by paying them that salary and
giving them their 12 weeks
route?
And then you're never a partner. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
exactly. The hard part is now, are they going to be motivated enough to pick up the big cases and to be as efficient and busy as the rest of us are? That's the fine line. we've actually talked about going to, like, with the guys we have hired now, it'll be the partnership model for the 7 that we have coming on. But going forward, we have actually talked about that, paying a salary, and then instead of, whatever it is, half of what they actually produce. But for a lot of the younger generation, all they want is the security.
Well, for me, the advisor side of me kicks in and says, well, ultimately, I mean, if all the revenue sucked back out of the practice every year, right? Everybody's eating what they kill. Everything 100% comes in, 100% goes out, and net out the expenses, et cetera. Your true value on the business is zero, right? Because if all of you are gone,
absolutely, right, my value is my labor.
Yes, we could start creating enterprise value there to have a tangible asset to sell in 10, 15, 20 years, or shares to transfer that are, they've got to buy in.
Right.
Now we were talking something. So that might be, again,
I think
take my advisor hat off, but
we get a lot of stipends for covering call at various hospitals or whatever. And so the way the partners make up extra revenue is we keep that revenue when the new people are not partners, right? They don't get a share in that. And when they're in their first 2 years, they're salaried. And so we keep a lot of cream off the top those first 2 years, but like you said, why not keep that cream for 20 years?
Yeah.
Right. Especially if all they're looking
if somebody wants to do it, right?
If all they're looking for is security, right? That's fine. I'll give you security. I'll give you a week, a month off.
Yeah. Here's the path to be a partner. Here's the path to
here's your
labor of love. Yep.
We're going to do a divergent pathway, Landon. Divergent.
There we go. I like it.
And then you just present them with the option they pick. You have a non-equity junior partner set up, or whatever the hell you want to call it. So they still feel important. But you're taking risk off of their plate by paying them a salary. And as a result, you get paid for that risk. Yeah, you get to keep the cream off the top. And man, I mean, in that revenue model, imagine if you united 20 of us under one roof.
That's what I'm talking about.
On that note, you mentioned the varicose vein. I think you said Montana, Wyoming, maybe buying a practice in those areas. And forgive the ignorant question, but do your licenses prevent you from expanding outside of Nebraska specifically for the main practice that you have?
Yeah, so you have to have a medical license for every state you practice in. So right now I've got medical licenses for Nebraska, Iowa, Arizona, and Montana. I would have to add a Wyoming license. It's not hard to do. It's an application process. You go before the board. They review your history and make sure you're not dangerous, I guess would be the proper word. So it wouldn't be a big deal. But yeah, because then I would want to, ultimately I'm getting into flying. I'm getting my pilot's license. And so ultimately
this practice comes with a plane as well. So
and ultimately I want to be able to fly myself around, number one. Number two, I want to be able to write that bird off, because there is no smart way to own an airplane without writing it off.
Yep.
But that's the next few months. We'll start working on that and see where that goes.
Yeah, because I kind of feel like, to Landon's point, if it's just a matter of paperwork in the meeting, obviously dumbing it down, but paperwork in the meeting to get your licenses, you just build almost like a law firm path where it's cut and dry. It's in year 1, you're this, year 2, you're this, so on and so forth. And you build that out nationally. I mean, shit, dude, you'll be buying us a plane just for
I would love,
just because you're trying to get some more write-offs.
Opportunity to buy you guys an airplane. I would love it.
We'll just be your strategic coaches and have the Interventional Radiology group as a client and go.
Oh yeah, buddy.
Well, it's cool because and I know Landon's like this, and Jeff, I'm sure you're like this. I think it's a blessing and a curse, where if I go out to a restaurant or I go out to any business, I'm like, well, why wouldn't you just do it that way? Or why wouldn't you do this? And there's some things that we brought up today that you've probably thought about. And there's other things that maybe you haven't, but I feel like everyone who owns a business, you can get sucked in the business, and it's tough to remove yourself to work on the business once it gets rocking and rolling.
Get such tunnel vision, right? I'm just as guilty of it as anybody. Just like you said, how easy is it to optimize Google reviews? I mean, geez, Louise, that's simple stuff.
It's a question at the end of the surgery when they're like, "Oh my God, this looks great." It's like, hey, would you, right? And you have not because you asked not. Like, just
that's exactly it, right? And I'm not afraid to ask questions.
when you're doing 20 plus cases a day, again, it becomes tough, right? It's
right.
the same problem for all of us.
So busy, and I'm so concerned about staying on time. You do overlook some of those details, and that's why I got smart friends like you guys to keep me straight.
Trying. Well, Jeff, one of the questions that we ask all of our guests, and you've already alluded to this early on, but I want to figure out like a specific takeaway or two that you got, but we want to distill a reading list for our audience. Now, I don't know necessarily how many people are going to pick up Business for Dummies, but in the event that they're interested in it, Jeff.
That's for remedial trainers like myself, okay? That's for the medical route people.
What was like an aha or two that you got from reading that book?
Number one, it gave me the confidence to know that anybody can do it. Right? It's not hard. It's a matter of effort and showing up every day. And it's not, I mean, people ask, how did you go to school for so long? How did you train for all these years? And it's perseverance, right? You show up and you do the job every day. That book was a good starting book. Obviously, I did the Rich Dad, Poor Dad thing and read those books. And speaking, you reading list things. Have you guys heard of David Goggins? Of
course.
Yes.
Of course, right? Have you read his book?
I've listened to Can't Hurt Me because I don't know. Did you read it or listen to it?
I listened to it.
Okay, so that was cool. So for those of you who
he read it.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't listen to it, what I like about it is they have a narrator that reads the book, and then the narrator does a mini podcast in between each chapter with David Goggins. It's badass.
Yeah. So, and then he's got a second book out, which I have downloaded. I have not read all or listened to all of it yet.
Same.
But then have you guys ever heard of Ed Milet?
Of course. Yep.
Yeah. So Ed Milet's book, what is it? It's
like one more. Yeah.
Power of One More.
Yep.
Power of One More. I've listened to that book I don't know how many times. Because it's well written, it's very simple, but the story of his dad and like being an alcoholic, and they had a terrible relationship when he was a kid, and then they grew together as his dad cleaned up, and now that he's an adult, he's like best friends with his dad, and then I think he passed away, didn't he? His dad a couple of years ago or something.
I believe so.
But anyway, he tells this story, and he would ask his dad. He's like, "Hey, Dad, are you going to stay sober for another 10 years?" He's like, I don't know if I'm going to do that, but I can tell you what, I can stay sober for one more day. You know what I mean? And it was just the power of one more day, the power of one more rep in the gym, the power of one more freaking cold call if you're in business. You know what I mean? And it's just a great read. And so, like, for anybody out there in the business world, especially if you're getting frustrated with whatever situation, that's the power of One More is a great book to listen to.
And
one more no, closer to a yes.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
What I like about both of those books and both of those people specifically is there's always going to be people out there that use whatever life experience they had as an excuse as to why they're not doing what they're capable of doing. Right. But when you hear about stories of David Goggins and Ed Milet with, the alcoholic father, it's like there is someone on this earth who had it way worse than you. Is doing way better than you. Your excuses are null and void.
Yeah, null. And then I've been getting into Patrick Bet-David.
Oh, the PBD podcast. I'm in the midst of his. I'm in the midst of his new book now.
Is what is it? Your next 5 moves.
Is that one? His new one is Choose Your Enemies Wisely. I'm like halfway through that. That's really good.
I'm on your next 5 moves, and it's how he talks about chess and how these grandmasters are at least 12 to 15 steps ahead. And he pared it down for business being 5 steps ahead. So you're not paralysis by analysis type thing.
Yeah.
But so I'm in the middle of that one right now, but I like him a lot. He's got a great
We listen to a lot of the same people, dude.
I know.
Have you checked out Andy Frisella yet?
No.
Oh yeah. Get on that.
Andy?
Okay. So Andy Frisella, Frisella. He has a podcast called Real AF. And there's a few different themes of episodes just to help filter it for you. He has Q&AF, which is all business stuff. He has Real Talk, which is 15, 20 minutes of just a topic that he's talking at you with. He has long form, which is kind of an interview like this with someone badass. And then my favorite ones, the political ones. It's CTIs cruise the internet, where they pull up headlines and then they pick it apart, extract the truth, call out the lies. Those are my favorite ones. And he's basically not predicted, because I guess kind of predicted, but everything that's happening now,
right?
Like a year and a half ago, he's like, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, they're going to do this. Andy Frisella's, he's the one you've probably heard of 75 Hard. He's the creator of 75 Hard.
Okay. Yep. I'm on it.
So
last but not least, I would say Naval. How to Get Rich Without Being Lucky is that one was pretty. It's a great podcast as well.
Yeah, I'm on these. I got them written down.
Is that a book or a podcast of how to get rich without being lucky?
That is it was like a series of podcasts. Yeah, but I just found it all in one form, but it was basically something he broke down. I think it was on his Twitter, and then people chime in with questions or whatever, and he just answer it. And the guy's freaking sharp, dude.
If you can find that link where it's all together, Landon,
I'll send it. I'll send it to you both. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Awesome.
Love to watch it.
Well, like I said, probably mid to end of Q1, I'll be back in Nebraska visiting a client. So Landon, obviously I'm going to see you. Jeff, would love to see you as well. But this has been wonderful. We know your time's valuable and not overly abundant with free time. So appreciate you shaving out some time for us.
Yeah, brother. Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity, guys. Like it's fun to share the story, and it's fun to talk with smart guys like you and get some insight on what we're going to do better next week.
Well, it's fun to see the MD hat flipped to the entrepreneur hat.
Right.
Like I said, there's not all that many of you out there doing it, and to be able to do it successfully is pretty sweet. And I think you got an interesting story and perspective to share. And personally, selfishly, I think for all of us, I think the world would be a better place if there was more private practice guys like you guys out there doing it, man. So
we're gonna work to spread the love as much as we can. At least
keep fighting that. Yeah, keep fighting that good fight, brother. We appreciate it.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise, and everyone who's listening, really appreciate your time as well. If you found this episode to be helpful, share it with a friend, spread the message, and we'll catch you on the next show. Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces.